Well, hello. It's been a while. As a matter of fact, gosh, I think it's been since maybe late September or early October, probably late September since I've been here. So I'm a little rusty. In case you guys haven't forgot, you're listening to the Companion Gundog podcast, and I'm your host Grayson Geyer. It's been a long stretch, guys. Thank you. If anybody out there um, remained subscribed to my podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify or whatever. I really appreciate that. It's cool that you guys hang with me, kind of recognize um, my inconsistency with getting these things out there. And, you know, I have enjoyed my hunting season immensely, and I have not missed feeling like I needed to pressure myself to make a podcast. And so that's what I've been doing. I hope you guys have been doing the same. And today I'm really mostly just kind of checking in. It is, gosh, it is January 30th. It's the second to last day of Woodcock season, and maybe one of the very few days in the last 44 that I have not been in the woods chasing woodcock. Um, and and really, I've got to go get my kid around lunch today. I got a client swinging by to swap some gear. Got a pretty gnarly case of plantar fasciitis that I'm going to let rest, but I promise you I will be out there tomorrow, last day of the season, a couple of young dogs, and we're not going to. I got an idea where birds are, but we're not going to go visit anything that we beat up on them this year. It's been a really interesting season in that, I think we all, if we do something for a few years and we have any level of success, we begin to become real confident in our skills. Woodcock, to me, in the area I live in, which is the Piedmont in North Carolina, are kind of humbling in that, right when you think you got them figured out, you go get skunked a couple of days in a row, and then you start questioning yourself if you really have the thing figured out or not. You start blaming the weather, which we had plenty of this year. But this year, I feel like I really, really grew as an outdoorsman, as a hunter, as a woodcock hunter specifically. I did worry a little less about being on birds and being in birds all the time. I've got 3 young dogs that I'm working in right now this season, and really tried to get them as many hours on the ground as possible this year. And so you always want to find birds for those dogs, but at the same time, I don't know. I'd never felt the pressure or the kind of that anxiety that I'm not going to find birds. I'm not going to get these dogs made. I really enjoyed every walk. I did quite a few of what I could call my training hunts this year, and I worked on them. I didn't really advertise them heavily. I had mostly kind of returning clients that booked, but I played with some new things this year, and I'm going to get around to talking a little more about that, because I probably will advertise a little more heavily next year. But every hunt was good, even the ones we went on, and there were 2 or 3 skunks in there, but we found birds most of the time this year. I feel like I'm getting, one of my clients I had out kind of equated it to fishing, where there's just that earned intuition. There are a lot of dudes and ladies that keep meticulous logs. They're going to document the weather, how many birds they found with what dog and what area, and they're going to really work to dial that in. And that's I got nothing against that at all, but it's certainly not my personality type. I'm not a analytical type. I'm just not into details and data and all that stuff. And so I don't really journal my hunts. I'll write something every, maybe couple of weeks, couple of months, that kind of details where I am for posterity's sake, maybe something for my kid to come thumb through at some point in his life after I'm gone, and think that that's cool. But as far as dialing in exactly where the birds are going to be. I don't do it, or just exactly what I did that day or anything else. But I have a lot of wonderful memories, and I enjoy my time out. It's definitely something I think it's common to hear people talk about living in the present, and I don't think for me personally there's any better way to do that than kind of get out into nature, whether it be fishing or hunting or whatever. But when I'm woodcock hunting, I'm really in the places I love to be the most at the time of year. I love to be there the most. The swamp, there's obviously more than the swamp, but big, water features, hydric soils, they're part of what we do. They're not always where we find our birds, but down here in the Southeast, I think, if you're not in them, you're usually adjacent to them, and you just feel like you're deeper in the forest than most people get, and that you're engaging with it in a way. I kind of, some lady was, made a comment on a social media post I made this year, and was inquisitive. She had read some books. Conte de Becasse, I think, it was maybe a French book, and she was a French reader, and made some sort of allusion to that. And, I just kind of said it's woodcock. If you're into them, if you're deep into them the way I am, you recognize that like the return on investment is nil in regards to meat. I always enjoy a game meal out of my woodcock, but it is pure outdoor recreation. It is pure sport, but then it's something a little deeper than that. And what I told her is I feel like I'm hunting pixies more than I am birds when I'm hunting woodcock. There's something kind of magic about it. They kind of own the space they're in. And so at the risk of, being a little obtuse on that one, or a little too flowery and romantic, that's what I told her, and it's what I meant. And I thought a lot about that this year. Thought about how lucky I am, to have created a job and a career for myself where I have the opportunity to do this and to be doing exactly what I would be doing if I were a gajillionaire, right? And so I'm not a gajillionaire. We built a comfortable living, but we're never going to, in terms of ambition for wealth, that's not something that's going to be achieved in this career. But I think I would much rather be doing this than spending the next 10, 20 years pursuing wealth to allow myself to do this at some unforeseen time when I reach the finish line. And that's something I think about a lot too. Like, every day is the finish line. If I'm lucky enough to make it to an average age, maybe I even make it a little bit beyond that. Maybe if I'm really, really lucky, I got another 20, 25 years of this left in my body. Maybe not, there's no telling what's in store for any of us day to day. So in terms of living in the present, I go as much as I can. And that's a lot compared to what the rest of the world gets to do for the most part. And so, I just count myself lucky in that regard. And that's been, I guess, and I'm lucky that I was born with kind of just a slant towards a positive mental attitude, and gratitude, but it has been another season of gratitude. It was it's been a few seasons since I had Ella, but in the woods with me anyway, but I thought a lot about her this year. I hunted a lot of our old haunts this year, or at least close to them. Where we were when she was a pup and a young dog. And so that was nice. And she was certainly with me in spirit, and on my mind most of the time I was out there. And her son, Pete, who is now 8, I kind of realized too this year, and he really carries the lion's share of the work when I have, especially a client with a client dog on a training hunt with me. Pete is a dog that he is the perfect dog to hunt with a less experienced dog. His hunting style is not, especially in his older age, is not extremely animated, but he'll range wide and he's smooth. And when he gets into birds, in the covers we hunt, and a lot of times this year, with the weather, there were some there were some interesting birds, some covers that had probably been pressured, birds that were being bounced around by crazy hard cold and snow and stuff like that, and didn't really have too many places to go, and some of them were a little sketch. And he did a lot more kind of creeping around on his belly this year, but he never gets too close or too weird or too wild, and he can handle any pressure from any dog. And so for that reason, it's hard not to put him on the ground. I try to never go more than 2 days in a row with him, and I need to obviously the young dogs need to get their work. But man, I certainly leaned on him a lot this season, and as of yesterday, I kind of recognized I knew he was losing a step coming into the season at 8 years old. He's on the back end of his prime. He's not by any means showing too much age or looking, elderly or decrepit, but he's slower than he once was. His enthusiasm is still there, but it's kind of there's a lot of discipline. I would say his experience has caught up to his physical ability and really surpassed it at this point. Now he's kind of on the backslide from a physical place, but mentally he is a heck of a bird finder. He is independent, but in contact. And I'm so happy with him and where he is now. And I hope next season is similar. But I'm starting to kind of prepare for, not necessarily for his retirement. I'm going to hunt him as long as he can possibly stand it. But obviously I'm going to have to back off him at some point for his sake and for his health's sake. And so we're just seeing that around the corner this year. But he hunted hard. He hunted, gosh, there were just a few days that I did not drop him and dropped other dogs, instead. Got to run a lot of the young dogs on their own, which I really prefer to do. I'll put them down with Pete until they show me they kind of recognize what a woodcock is and that they recognize it as a game bird, and they start pointing it a little bit. And then I like to get them out there alone and let them start finding their own birds, putting the pressure on them to find their own birds, because so often the young dogs will get in that experienced dog's hip pocket and just become reliant on them. And even if they learn to find their birds independently of the other dog, the more experienced dog on the ground, and they do a good job bracing with them, I've even with those dogs, sometimes I see a lack of confidence without another dog on the ground, and they just act a little differently. So I want them to show me who they are as a solo dog. And because I do a lot of these training hunts, I rarely brace my own dogs, anytime I hunt. I just like hunting them alone. I like to see them do their own work. I like to let them be the star of the show when it's me alone. And so that was fun. Again, that was for the most part, that was my season, man. I hunted my home range from December through January. I'm taking the day off, but I will be out there one last time tomorrow. And it's been just another one for the books. And I'm already excited for next season. And speaking of next season, it'll be kind of planning to do it just the way I did it this year. It was perfect. It took a mid-October, kind of the last couple of weeks of October between classes, and I run up to the central Midwest, or some point deep in the north where I can get into a good number of birds. This year it was the Great Lakes area. Went up there with friends and just had a wonderful time. Got into lots of birds, hung out with Stump and his crew, and then went down and hung out with my friend Nick Adair and did a big podcast with those guys, him and Nate Zarnota and Randall Lycan. And that was a great camp. Dogs got a lot of experience. Came home, pick up my November class, run that till mid-December when Woodcock picks up, and then it's right around here. So from this point forward, I got a spring class picking up in March. That's full. I do have a couple of spots for my retrieve program that runs May through the end of July, or 1st of May through the end of July. I got people kind of on the line for that. So at some point, that'll probably fill pretty quickly. And then just starting to add people to my September class now. So if you've got an interest, if you're really wanting to get into the retrieve program, give me a shout, or give Emily a shout at the business line. If you're looking at maybe an early season tune-up for the September class next year, that usually starts. People start thinking about that right about now. As the season's ending, they're starting to look forward to next season. So I would say spring, that thing starts filling up, and then there'll be the November class, and then back the way we go again. And I don't think I've got anybody in the November class for next year yet, anyway. But if you're looking out at your yearly calendar, board and trains are back in session. I'll be picking up some group classes again. I got to get into the schedule on that one, but keep an eye on my website. The front page of my website will list the events, and I'll list all my group class schedule there. I've had a lot of people ask me about it. And so I'm sorry, I can't remember who all those people are. So the best way, if you're one of those folks, is just get over to the website, look at the homepage. That'll probably take me another few days to get filled out. But I'm back in the mode. We're back in training season. Individual lessons you can book, through my website, as well. You can just follow the link, and that'll give you access to my calendar to book an individual lesson. And I hope to see all of you out here soon enough. Training season, I had this in my mind where I wanted to kind of chat about the wild bird purity thing versus training and stuff. And, honestly, I love it all, man. I'm kind of actually looking forward to getting back to training and less hunting, even though to some degree there's a lot of overlap and they're kind of one and the same. Especially hunting woodcock, there's a reason they're a popular bird for starting young dogs or breaking dogs on. They tend to be relatively cooperative. But I would say this year there was that was not the case probably the majority of the time this year. But nonetheless, the dogs still learn a lot, and they learn a lot about handling birds. And so my advice to everyone is always, if you get to the time where you've got birds local, anything to work on that's wild, I think your time is better spent in the woods or in the field chasing those wild birds in terms of development for your dog. And then using your training season to kind of teach concepts. I was going to say patch holes, but I don't like that nomenclature, to be honest with you. I think kind of teach concepts and reinforce concepts that you want to see on the wild birds. We do this for the most part, even if we're big into field trialing and stuff, we do it because we want bird dogs. And it's not a knock on pen raised birds to say that without wild birds, in my opinion, there's not much of a use for having bird dogs. Preserves have their place. But I think all too often we see that as an opportunity to somehow do something for our dog, when most times if I'm going to a preserve, and I think if most people are going to a preserve, and I hope you guys don't find this offensive, it's for us, not the dog, even if we're acting like it's for the dog. You're going to get just so much more value out of days spent in the field learning how to find wild birds, as opposed to kind of kicking around the field and not learning how to find wild birds and finding potentially bad birds that are not going to be great for your dog. And I find that most preserve proprietors are trying to sell you the sport of hunting the birds in their field, as opposed to trying to help you make your dog better. And so I'll probably, I'm working again along with my training hunts. I'm going to build a bit of a webinar. Obviously, as you can see today, I'm on a new software. I don't even know what I'm going to do about my intro and outro music. It's probably going to change because I am now doing this all on Riverside, and I've got video up too. And so I'm probably going to upload these to YouTube, as well as put them on my podcast stream. And just make them available there, because I've been hearing for a while that people are using YouTube as kind of a podcast resource. I'm way behind the times with all that stuff, but I've actually started doing it myself. There's a couple of kind of content creators on YouTube that aren't really, they're kind of like a podcast, but they don't really stream to podcast platforms, which I would probably prefer to use otherwise. I find YouTube a little clunky for it, but I've been finding myself recently going and opening their videos and just using the audio and listening to what they have to say. And so for that reason, just so I'm not way behind the times, I'm going to go do that. Obviously, it's not because I'm looking to monetize my content, or I would drop more than one podcast every 4 or 5 months. But I'll put it there. You guys go look at it. It's going to be rudimentary, guys. I don't have any fancy camera equipment. I'm not really looking to become a producer of any sort. I try to make my audio clean, but you can just look at my pretty mug. And today you can see old Ripple down here. It's his first day getting to hang out in the kitchen while I do one of these. And he's doing really well. So yeah, so that's it. So I guess what I'm leading into is that I'm going to, because of this new software through Riverside, I really got it so that I could start trying to play with some webinars. I wanted to start looking at some online instruction. I wanted to kind of prep for my training hunts, and I've been doing that on an individual basis this season, where essentially I'm teaching how I map scout prior to hunting, and then give a big overview of just maybe the woodcock migration, habitat, terrain, vegetation, landforms, hydrology, all of those things that play into what I'm looking for when I kind of plan an approach to a woodcock hunt in my region. And so what I'm going to plan to do is kind of do a general one of those for a broader audience, and then figure out a way to make it available behind a paywall to some degree. But I've liked it. I've enjoyed it. I've gotten really good feedback from the people I've taken hunting and done that with this year. And then what I'll do is I'll offer that in conjunction with my training hunts next year, and I'll make that available on the calendar. So you should be able to, if you want to buy the webinar, you can buy it standalone. And if you want to buy it in conjunction with a training hunt, then what I'll do is make you a little personalized map study that we will use. And just to kind of expound on what my training hunts are, guys, I've struggled with this a long time. I've spoken about this on the podcast, but I guided woodcock generally for a couple of years, and I really felt uncomfortable doing it. Number one, I was like just visiting the same birds. Even I would give them rest, but I was going back to the same holes over and over again. And I was not enjoying that at all. Like, that's boring to me. But also it's not the best thing in the world for the resource, because especially if we're on public land, we're just burning those spots every time we take somebody to them. And that's not guiding on public land. It's free America stuff. And I do believe that these birds, if we pressure them hard enough to make them leave, they got options. I don't think the hunting pressure is really beating the resource too bad, but it's certainly not helping it, and it's hurting the general hunting. And so for my training hunts, we're prospecting. So what I do is I do a general map study. I show you a map study. I give you a general area, and my sports for that day are going to pick the area they want to do, and we're going to work the map study out together to some degree, right? So the area that they would like to hunt, based on the information I've given them in the little webinar, and then we go prospect that. And with that, doing it that way, like, there's a pretty good chance we're not going to find birds, but if we do it right, there's a pretty good chance we will. And so even though we're taking your dog in hopes that we're going to get contacts, there's a potential that we won't. But the idea is, after that hunt, you're going to have the opportunity and the know-how to go plan your own and do it until you get it right, because that's what it takes. One day in a woodcock bottom is not going to make a dog. It can go a long way, but the idea is to make that replicable for you when you're done with me. So whether we go down there and we move 50 birds or 1 or 0, you're going to understand what you're looking for the next time you go. And eventually you're going to bump into your birds. You're going to gain confidence. Your dog's going to gain confidence and skill. And you're off to the races and able to do this on your own indefinitely. And that's what I want to offer folks. And again, that way we're not burning spots. We're not beating up the resource too bad. And we're helping with retention and recruitment, while at the same time making a living, which is a part of this too. And I don't, to some degree need to be unapologetic about that. Uh, so if you're interested in that, again, reach out. I'll do my best to have that webinar up as soon as possible. I'd like to have it up for an extended period of time before next season. And then again, kind of getting back, I'm going to probably make a few of these. I really like the software. I think it works well for this. I can upload slides and kind of mix them into the video as I move along and share those. I can do it all in real time without having to do a bunch of editing on the back end, and that's really what's always kept me from doing stuff like this. And I can screen share and run through on X and do whatever as well. So it's I like it. We'll do the one on the woodcock hunting. We'll probably do some. Nope. Hey. No, sir. Good. Nope. All right. That's helping my young board lab get back on his place board. But to get back to that, so again, I'll probably do some on training. Nick Adair and I are working on potentially putting together some sort of instructional on check cord work, talking about the pinch collar. And then I'd like to do one just like on how to best approach pen raised birds and preserve work for the betterment of your dog. So expect those hopefully in the coming months. Keep an eye out for them, and as I figure out how to get those available to the public. Other than that, guys, I'm looking forward to this training season. I'm really enjoying. We have a beautiful day today, and I'm looking forward to more of this kind of weather, and seeing the green come and getting the garden in. And we're still a ways out from that. It's the end of January, but today, man, I think we're in the 60s, and it's got me itching. Got a little spring fever running around this house, especially for those of you guys in the Southeast that know what the last 3 to 5 weeks have looked like. I mean, I think this is the longest hard freeze I've ever seen in my time, at least as an adult in this area. And then we had this last snowfall event, and I guess I want to touch on it real quick before I jump off. This last kind of snowfall hard weather event came up from the southwest, which is not uncommon for our moisture, but we had a really heavy, hard, cold, like polar vortex sitting on top of us prior to that. And so we got a lot of ice and snow. That vortex dipped even further south into the deeper south below us. And the weather really came up southeast of us. So it ran from like New Orleans, got a ton of snow all the way up through Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and then southeastern North Carolina. And we were really spared most of the snow and ice. But the, parts south and east of us got a lot of that weather. And I don't know what the birds did. I got kind of worried about them for a little bit. And I did find some pretty weak birds. And I just, normally we get that weather out of the north. We get the hard, that cold weather comes out of the north, even though the moisture comes up from the south. But usually the harder weather is not south and east of us. And that's where the birds, in my opinion, the terminus is. So when we think about the wintering grounds of woodcock, I mean, Louisiana, of course, and they got hammered. And then to me, like Georgia, northeast and Georgia, southeast, South Carolina, eastern North Carolina, really, really high densities for the eastern flyway of wintering woodcock. And those places all got hammered and I know lost birds because of it. And with the southern wind, I think we picked up a few of those birds, but all the bottoms were frozen. And I just think they really struggled through that. But went out yesterday. It was warm. Saw decent numbers of birds, and they all looked healthy. So I think they've recovered. And, this ain't the first time over the last couple of, few millennia that woodcock have been thriving in this area, that they've, encountered weather. So I'm sure they'll recover, but I'll be interested to see if it has any impact on next season, and it may. But just, food for thought if you are a hard woodcock hunter. In addition to that, for those that are serious woodcock hunters, I'm kind of interested in finding maybe some like old school woodcock hunters, people that have actually targeted woodcock in the Southeast going back a few decades ahead of us. So if anybody knows anybody like that or has stories of anybody like that, I'd appreciate you reaching out to me and just telling me about them, because I think we've got a bit of a renaissance of a southern woodcock culture. We know that they, were kind of a trash bird next to quail prior, but I do know that there were people that did target them even in those days. And I'm really interested to hear more about those people, because I don't really have a direct link to anybody, at least living anymore. So if you know anything about that, reach out. And then otherwise, guys, I think that's my little update for the year for my hunting season. I'm back at it. I look forward to trying to get more content out to you guys as I'm thinking about it. But thanks for listening, and again, thanks for sticking with me through these lulls, and I'll look forward to talking to you next time.